We come together this afternoon from various places around Australia, and I am on Yuggera and Turrbal country here in southeast Queensland. You might like to think of the traditional name of the country that you are currently on. We've just celebrated National Reconciliation Week with the theme Bridging Now to Next, and I'm sure that your communities acknowledged this important time within our nation's calendar and invited your communities to reflect on the ongoing connection between the past, the present, and the future. This is what we do, of course, when we acknowledge country. It is a wonderful connection between traditions past, traditions that are remembered and lived out today, and our hopes for an Australia that is truly reconciled with its First Nations people. So, in the spirit of reconciliation, FSA acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia who have walked and cared for this land for thousands of years, and also their descendants who maintain their spiritual connections and traditions. We thank them for their continual cultural and spiritual connection to country, as expressed through their history, their music, their language, their songs, their stories, their art, and their dance. We respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands to our north, to our south, to our east, and to our west, and reflect on the millions of footprints that have travelled these dreaming pathways and continue to walk this land.
And so we stop for a little time of prayer. And of course, as Franciscans, we sense the sacred in all of connection, in all of creation, in the connections that we have, the encounters that we have with one another and with all of creation. Because for us, we find God's love expressed in the very canvas of our everyday life and in creation all around us. However, as educators, we know that our outward life is exceptionally busy and it's really demanding. And so at the end of a really busy day, we breathe a prayer of gratitude and thanks as we stop. And I just invite you just to take a breath. If you wish, close your eyes. For God awaits for you in the stillness, in the silence of your heart. Just invite you to place your hand on your heart and breathe out. Place yourself in God's presence now. And we pray, good gracious God, open our hearts to all that you offer us this afternoon. As we stop for a moment, lead us into that mysterious silence where your love is revealed to all who call. Maranatha, come, Lord Jesus. And we stop for a moment of silence. And before you finish with our prayer, I ask you just to think about those that you hold in your heart, those people that might need your prayers today, those people that love you and are with you always. O God of all, at this time of our gradual awakening to the dangers that are imposing on our beautiful Mother Earth, we ask that you open our hearts and minds of all your children, that we may learn to nurture rather than destroy our planet. Guide us as followers of Francis and Claire to walk in the footsteps of Jesus, who saw you in all that they encountered and praised you through all creation. And we ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Creator and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And so we come to the last two chapters of Hindmarsh's book. I'm sure you have read them. And chapter 6, in particular, calls us to this very ancient understanding of Sabbath, of rest and renewal. Now, I'm a child of the 60s. Yes, I know, I'm doing really, really well. I look great. But I am a child of the 60s, and I well remember the fourth commandment, keep holy the Sabbath day, as we find in Exodus. And we as a family, the Price household, we always kept the ritual of Mass. We always went to Sunday Mass and then the obligatory Sunday roast together around table, normally in the afternoon. However, sometimes I do remember that when the purse strings were really tight, it wasn't a roast at all, but it was beef tongue with white onion sauce. I really hated it. But I was forced to eat it. And so obviously, as I reflect back now that I am a mother as well, it must have been very hard for my mum and my dad, who had 5 children, raising 5 children on one income. So I totally understand why sometimes it was tongue and not roast now. Anyway, for us, as it may have been for you, Sunday was the Sabbath day. It was a day of doing very little and certainly of afternoon naps. And I wonder how many of you might remember that ritual from your own childhood or something very, very similar. Now, Hindmarsh, in her book, if you have it in front of you, now on page 50, she reminds us that all the great religions of the world, all spiritual movements, include some form of Sabbath. Right down the bottom of page 50, she talks about that this was a time set aside for prayer, rest from labour, and the expression of gratitude for the gifts of creation. Now, on page 51, we hear once again that in Laudato Si, Pope Francis acknowledges that the Jewish origins of Sabbath and the importance also of Christians of this concept of Sabbath. And it wasn't just for humans. You'll see on page 51 where she writes, the law of weekly rest forbade work on the 7th day, so that your ox and your donkey may have rest, and the son of your maid servant and the stranger may be refreshed. Rest opens our eyes to the larger picture and gives us renewed sensitivity to the rights of others. And so the day of rest, centered on the Eucharist, sheds its light on the whole week and motivates us for a greater concern for nature and the poor. Now, of course, our farmers really understand this concept, don't they, of laying a paddock to rest so that the soil can restore its nutrients and rejuvenate itself in order for the next harvest to be really plentiful. This was Sabbath for the land, and obviously Sabbath for the oxen and those beasts that were working the land as well. However, we do know that this whole concept in our economic times today has really gone by the wayside. We tend to be open all hours, don't we? We just have to think about how often we are working into the night every night, and whether we actually get any time where we rest on Sunday at all. We often push ourselves, don't we, 7 days a week. I've got to say that I'm really, really guilty of that. I really do confess that. I have my son here beside me doing his own work going, yeah, 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 that's you. He's obviously tuning in. And of course, we have really done this as well with our earth. But for long-term sustainability and fruitfulness, we really have to turn away, don't we, from these imperial values. And this we see that Hindmarsh writes about on page 51 as well. Today we must turn away from imperial values of domination, extraction, and recover the sabbatical values of regeneration, reciprocity, and conviviality. This is what she talks about there. And I guess JP2 really expressed this very beautifully when he said in his World Day of Prayer, his message, his peace message of 1990, find peace with God the Creator, peace with the whole of creation. And this is what he talks about when he calls us to peace in our world today, finding rest as well. He calls us in the book of Genesis, he writes, where we find God's first self-revelation to humanity. There's this recurring theme that we Franciscans pick up on all the time. And God saw it was good. God entrusted the whole of creation to the woman, to the man, and only then, as we read, could God rest from all God's good works. So I think this is where we return to this fundamental belief for Franciscans, and this recurring theme for us of goodness takes us back to our first online conversation where we looked at God's goodness and what does that really mean for us today. That God made it good, so everything is good. So my question really is, well, two really. Do you have a Sabbath? Do you set aside time for prayer, rest from labor, rest from our devices? And do you say thank you for the gifts of creation? And finally, where do you define this time of Sabbath, this sacred time of peace and rest? For me, I've shared last time that it's walking in the bush bathing. That's me. It might be a walk of sunset, or it might be a sacred place in your garden. It may be at your home where you simply close the door, and that is your time of rest and relaxation and silence. If I was really to reflect, I said to you last week that I was online with COVID, and it reminded me of our first wave in the pandemic crisis of 2020. If I reflect on those 5 days, it's the image of dolphins returning to what were now healthy canals of Venice for the first time in absolute decades, because of the crises that actually allowed the earth and the canals of Venice to rejuvenate itself. For me, they were really, really powerful images and a warning that we really have to take stock of our living patterns. So let's share about this idea of Sabbath now. I know, Richard, you're going to pop us into rooms so that we can find out how others find time of Sabbath and how we might live sustainably. So I know that you're going to pop the two questions. You've already done them, and we get a little opportunity to talk with one another.
Yes, thanks everyone. Our first two questions: how do you find a place or state of Sabbath in your life? And how do you consciously live more sustainably in your personal life? So that were the two questions that were posted to the meeting and to the follow-up email also. We've got 10 minutes in the breakout room. So I do know that it sort of brings you back very quickly, but I will sort of monitor the time and just sort of give you a reminder of a couple of minutes left. And I will sort of broadcast those two questions also in the chat. So I'm going to open those rooms for you now. Well, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully everyone's been able to, return. We had a couple of issues just with people connecting to those rooms with, unstable internet and the like. We've got an opportunity to really just take 3 or 4 responses from the group. So what were maybe some common themes that you were hearing in your conversation about how we find a place or a state of Sabbath in your life? And/or how you consciously live more sustainably in your personal life. What motivates you to walk more gently upon the earth? Do we have any volunteers who would like to share with the larger group? Just feel free to raise your hand so I can see you, or just unmute and share with the group.
Great, Lauren.
One of the themes that I felt came through in our room between the 3 individuals was taking a Sabbath like on the Saturday, but finding it through exercise. So whether it was through running or going to or walking, connection with so that connection with nature, or doing Pilates, those sort of things. And it was finding that space to really clear your mind and then get prepared for the day. That was sort of from the three individuals. So Sasha and Matthew, I hope I've spoken okay of what you've said, but that's what came through in our discussion, was finding that space.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Lauren. Another group, please.
We were the same with the exercise. And we sort of mentioned being busy enough to find rest in between the moments of busyness. So whether it's, the moments before you jump into bed, or maybe it's, on the way somewhere in the car, or even the night before preparing for the next busy day, getting yourself organised enough to be able to organise the next day. And if it's exercise in the morning, then going to bed early enough so that you're preparing to put aside that time for you or whatever you're doing, and being organised the night before.
Thanks, Patrick. How are we all going in terms of regulating our use of devices into the evening, whether that be, laptops or phones? We've got the evidence to suggest that, these things aren't good in terms of our brain calming. We might think that they are a form of relaxation, but it really does stimulate our minds. So, sort of leaning back in on those, ancient traditions of contemplation, to really still our mind, will really sort of, aid our sleep. It's certainly a wonderful message, not only for our young people, but also for us, I think, as well. And another group. We've got time for just one more.
Hi, Richard. I had Charlotte and Narelle in our group.
Thanks, Michelle.
And Charlotte made me jealous because she was talking about the lovely family gatherings she has every Sunday, like whether they're large or small, but they make a commitment to gather every Sunday. So
Right.
Narelle and I were a bit, jealous of the fact that, can spend time with the family, which I know that's something that I struggle with. And Narelle was talking about the fact because she travels so far each day that her time in the morning is her time to stop and reflect and try and gather her thoughts because she has no one to distract her. And I sort of refer to the fact that I make a time on a Sunday for about an hour to sit and just read a book, just tune everything out and just lose myself because I love to read. And I think that, it seems to be the common theme of just finding time for ourselves in such a busy, world that it just makes a difference to our lives if we can just do those little things.
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle. That's great. Thanks very much for your sharing. Alison, I'll hand back to you now.
Yeah. Because all of those sharing, all those little moments of time really lead us to being really motivated to restore and respond to this cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. And that's what chapter 7 of Hindmarsh's book is really all about, that there is a real urgency. And I know that Sam and I and Rose in our little room before, we talked about this, that there is a real urgency, isn't there? When we hear about credible climate science tells us that our sister Mother Earth temperatures are rising and that our islands are sinking, that the polar caps are really melting, and human beings really are the cause of our planet's environmental crises. If you have a look at the infographic on page 56, you can see about the loss of plant species and insects and what that might do to our coral reefs as well, what that extreme heat we might actually be in for if we don't attend to looking after the earth, and that we know that we have nobody else to blame but ourselves, and that the time to act is really now. And furthermore, we as Christians, there's a real spiritual basis for this action as well. We really need a conversion of heart to ecological justice, which leads us to conversion in action, which is the action that we take in our everyday life. Now, in our last time that we met, Richard really spoke about the history of Christian theology that centers on the environment. And in a very quick and simple way, he really unpacked for us this real shift over time of our own spiritual understanding from dominance over the earth to this real stewardship of the earth, and furthermore into the encyclical's real emphasis on integral ecology. And that recognizes the interconnectedness of all things. And in the book Care for Creation, and some of you, and if you haven't got it, I highly recommend it. It looks like this. There's a new publication out as well. Currently, it was published at the end of last year, 2024. But it's written by theologians, Franciscan theologians and activists, and it really is about this ecology of conversion. Francis, we know, preached conversion of heart, not only to individuals but to groups in his society, and this strategy is needed very much today as well. If we are ultimately going to progress towards a more sustainable life and our world, we really have to embody the values that Francis had as well: compassion, wisdom, integrity, both as individuals and, of course, as communities, communities of education, but communities in our world today as well. Richard, do you think you might be able to speak a little bit more about this ecological conversion and how it is understood through a Franciscan lens?
Yeah, sure, Alison. When we talk about conversion, As Alison said, this idea of conversion of heart was really at the centre of St. Francis's message, and it's probably best understood as a gradual turning away from self-centeredness to right relationships. This is sort of like picking up on some of these themes that we've spoken about, since our very first Connection Circle, because it really is just so central to, our Franciscan spirituality. I think when we talk about right relationships, I think it's also, being gentle on ourselves, really accepting ourselves as imperfect creatures. It's about seeking to establish right relationships with all people and with creation itself, and certainly being in right relationship with God. It suggests that this sort of transformation is not only an outward action, but it's also an inner intention. It requires a shift in what we value, because this will necessarily result in a change in what we do. So it means embracing humility and simplicity. It begins certainly at an individual level, but it also has a social dimension. We really can't, I think, achieve full conversion unless we are, also changing the society in which we live. So, this idea of conversion is certainly both individual and it is also social in its dimensions. Okay, so let's move on to our next topic. I don't know why the slides are misbehaving, but we will see how we can fix that. Okay, so when we look at the Franciscan idea of poverty, it can be understood in a couple of different ways. It's the absence of attachment to things. So this sine proprio, that is, a concept so central to the Franciscan way of being. You might understand this as the virtue of enoughness. That is, doing without what we really don't need, just having enough to sustain us, within our lives. Again, we might use words like simplicity or frugality to explain this. Poverty is also the knowledge that we are imperfect and not self-sufficient. So again, just sort of think about this language, how it sort of speaks to the idea of conversion, how it also speaks to the idea of right relationship. I think in acknowledging our need, we are actually open, we're receptive, we're perhaps grateful to God for the gifts that God has given to us. Franciscan poverty places God at the centre, and it values the relationship rather than the things. Interestingly, Francis very rarely wrote about poverty. He certainly lived it. But when he did write about it, what he seemed to emphasise was actually community. So I think this really gives us a deep sort of understanding of what poverty looked like in action for Francis. And our final concept that we're looking at today is justice. This sort of speaks to this idea that conversion is not just an individual, experience. It also has a social dimension. According to Bonaventure, conversion to poverty is conversion to justice. Once we realise our need for God, we begin, and others, creation itself, right? We begin to realise our need for others. It recognises the other as family or kin, sisters and brothers, to whom we're called into right relationship. Justice is the sister of poverty because it acknowledges that nothing in this finite world truly belongs to any particular individual. It's sort of held in common and it serves the common good, or it should. Everything, of course, is contingent on the generosity of God. And I think that sort of explains why the Franciscan motto is Deus meus et omnia, my God and my all. Now, this section, of the book that I'm synthesizing this from Care for Creation, a Franciscan Spirituality of the Earth by Ilia Delio, Keith Douglas Warner, and Pamela Wood, ends in this way. It says, living a simple lifestyle begins to restore justice in our world when we truly live a penitent life in Francis's spirit of voluntary poverty. We build right relationships in our world. But until we bring the lived experience of our converted hearts into the larger world, we will not experience the fullness of the converted heart. We must not be content with transforming only our individual lives. We must, like Francis, find the courage to proclaim the transforming power of this good news to the world. Now, it's really interesting that just on Monday we had Father Casey Cole visit us here in Brisbane. And it was really lovely to sort of hear Casey speaking to, leaders in schools, to students in schools, and religious educators across a number of different schools and ministries. And he sort of spoke about this idea, of penitence, and he spoke about evangelization. And I can see just so many points of resonance with these three Franciscan concepts that we've unpacked today: conversion, poverty, and justice. So thanks very much, Alison. I'll hand back to you now.
Thanks, Richard. And you're absolutely right. I can see all of these connections as well. Franciscans talk or are singing from the same hymn book, aren't we, in many ways. But thank you for making those connections for us. I think it's really critical that we, as people of faith, but also furthermore as Franciscan people who really take spirituality seriously, that we're being called to action and justice in our world today. And I'm really pleased to say that there is signs of hope, and I think we are in this year of hope, but we are hopeful people as well, and we know that there are young people and staff in all of our schools and around the world who are really taking action. There's really good things happening as well. It's not all bad, and I think that's really critical to talk about and to remind ourselves also. And as part of the celebrations, of course, of the Canticle of the Creatures and Laudato Si this year, Franciscan Schools Australia, with the support of Franciscan Federation of Australia, most particularly the Friars, offered some integral ecology grants. Now, Richard sent a little page to you and attached that to this particular information about our Connection Circle, and I'm pleased to say that they have been all awarded, and Richard did attach that little PDF for you. There's also a page on the FSA website that also details some of the ways in which schools are really taking action. But just very, very briefly, I just wanted to let everybody know that there were about 6 projects that were supported this year. There was a project that rehabilitated a school site to increase its biodiversity through the installation of some nesting boxes and some bee hotels on the school grounds. There was a project that sees the installation of a composting worm farms that was going to really augment an existing garden and garden club, and it's going to become now a vehicle for student and community education around waste and disposal. There was a project, and I know that Rose is going to speak a little bit more about this in a moment, but we have also supporting a school project of a plastic recycling project that students are going to pitch to an international audience as well. There was a project that rejuvenated existing gardens to better support healthy produce. There was also another project that was going to convert an underused area in the school to what they named a Laudato Si gathering place. So they're going to pay attention to native plantings and birdhouses and Franciscan imagery and things like that. And finally, there was a project that rejuvenates and expands an existing garden, and they were going to turn it into a better learning environment for all of the students in the school, and it focuses on water sustainability and waste reducing and composting. And I'm sure that there's lots and lots of other projects happening in all of our schools around Australia that we don't even know about at all. Now, I've asked 4 people if they wouldn't mind sharing very briefly some of the ways in which their school is really engaging in this idea of Franciscan care for creation with the whole group. We're going to go north to Townsville first with Angela. Then we were going to head down to Mornington, to the peninsula down there in Victoria, to Padua. But I know Natalie's really, really unwell, so Richard might do that. And then we were going to zoom back to Brisbane, and we're going to hear from Sam at Mount Alvernia, and then Glenys, who works at ACU. So I'd really like to thank those people for quickly sharing some of the ways in which their community are really signs of hope and action in their world. They are going to keep it short and succinct, so I'm going to hand over and ask Rose, would you like to tell us a little bit about what's happening up in St Anthony's Catholic College up in Townsville?
I certainly would love to. Angela is Betteridge there. She's also at St Anthony's, and this is her baby, but I've sort of been a bit of support for her along the way. We have quite a few projects happening. They're not in the air, they are happening. The students are part of it. We are a P-12 campus college, and on the lower campus, we call that Padua campus, and we've got quite a few things going. We obviously all get a lot of little plastic lids from our milk bottles, etc. We'd set up a little program that we hoped to get up and running to actually crush down the lids and to melt them and to repurpose them. That's in a nutshell, really, but it took a long time. And we have had access to a shredder, which allowed us to break it down. And we also were given quite a bit of money. Long story short, we won $10,000, and that allowed us to buy the extruder, which allows us to melt the plastics down. And we have little molds, and one of the molds we have create, I don't know if you can see it, probably can't, but into little pens. And we have made quite a lot of these little pens. I use this every day, and we sell them. We raise money, and that's just one of our items that we've made. So we recycle. The students, our eco-marine students, they collect the lids, they shred them down, and they melt them. They have their little program running. And one of the other little programs we have along with it is creating little pots. Same process. It's not easy, and would vouch for this. It's not an easy process, even though the plastics, you would think they're the same. They're not really the same. So there's been a bit of trial and error to make them almost near perfect in shape. Colouring is what you get. However, that's our future pens and forever pens. And these, the students make these. We sell them, we give them, we donate them, and you know, it's a little program that we have here at St. Anthony's. It was so well received that Alison, when the crew went across to, I think, San Francisco, we were able to make, I think, 1,000 pens, Alison, I think we made. And we were able to give them, with Alison's help, across to the Franciscan schools across the other side of the world. And they've made contact with us, and we're working with them to enable them to be a part of recycling and repurposing their plastics. But I think the grant that Alison has given us has enabled us to have our small team of eco-marines to then go to Tangalooma to then present with Angela, present our program to the world. So there's students from across the other side of the world will be there, and we get to present this to them. So that's with the Franciscan Schools Australia's assistance. We are able to do that. And look, that's just one of the things we do with our little pots. That's another little program. This is working with our parish, and I don't know if you can see. There's a little what do you call this? Just a little plant, and we're hoping that with the assistance from the parish parishioners, that they can take this on and help make little pot plants, and we'll sell these to our parishioners, and that's raising money again for the church. So it's not raising money for us, it's raising money for our church or our parishioners. So I'm not a wealthy church, but this is just one small thing that the school can do in connection with our parish.
Thank you very much, Rose. That's fantastic.
Just some of the small things we do. So.
Yeah. Not so small, really, when you get an international audience. However, good to know that 3 little bottle caps can make recycled into a pen.
Yep.
So any school can get in contact with either myself or with Rose or Angela, and those pens are available for purchase as well. And it's a great thing to do.
Yeah, it takes 12 lids to make a little pot.
Right.
So,
yeah. Nice.
It's good going, yeah.
Thank you so much, Rose. That's really wonderful. You can answer some of those questions.
Certainly, I'll do that.
Richard, would you like to just chat about what Natalie was going to talk about, or do you want Sam to say something now and come back to you last?
Yeah, Alison, I'm just mindful of time. It's 4:41, and I think we've still got a 10-minute breakout room to do.
Okay.
So I might just go to Sam for a short, insight to what's happening here at Mount.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Alison. I'll be succinct. Here at Mount A, and I note that I've actually got many of my colleagues online, Richard included, Liz, Sasha, Tonya, and Michelle. At Mount Alvernia College, we have a wonderful, very established garden, established back in 2015. So it is now, 10 years of age, which is just plentiful, full of citrus fruits, exotic fruits, everything you could imagine, lots and lots of vegetables. We call it La Foresta, our beautiful gardens. And these gardens, of course, are productive gardens, and they link very, very closely with the produce that we use both in La Cucina, which is our college cafe, and also our hospitality kitchens. So it's very much a paddock to plate experience, very sustainable. We use everything that we possibly can. I suppose further to that, the gardens are themselves a place of Sabbath. I mean, Alison and I were talking before that, it is literally, not only the largest classroom in the school, but it's also our wellbeing centre. So it serves, many, many purposes, both as a productive garden, but also as a place of wellbeing and deep contemplation and prayer for our community. Just as an additional initiative to this, I mean, we certainly did lots and lots of other things at Mount that I could spend a lot of time telling you about, but we recently, in the last couple of years, initiated something called Grow It Forward, because we know that our productive garden is so huge and we have such a bountiful supply of, wonderful seeds and seedlings. So we started a community initiative where we were sharing with our community seed bombs, seedlings with little details from our curator of gardens on how you might go about planting, sweet potato or basil or different herbs and what have you. And that's been really wonderful to sort of build that, care for the environment and our food sources within our community as well. So it's a real educative piece. And I know Liz Sims, who works very closely with our Sprout Squad, the students who really, work very, very closely with that, with La Foresta, and have lots of other initiatives as well. But that's just to share you a little bit about what we're doing at Mount A with our beautiful La Foresta productive garden.
Thank you, Sam. I know that we might get an opportunity, and I'll talk a little bit later about how we might be able to share more of this, and we can produce it in our next newsletter. It's wonderful to hear all these things that are happening in our school communities, and we are now at 4:50. We only really have about 15 minutes left if you bear with us, but it'd be really lovely to be able to chat a little bit more, and we might only really be able to have about 7 minutes in a room, but it'd be good to connect again and to really talk in our rooms now about other things that are happening in our schools, and also whether you have a Laudato Si action plan and how do you really celebrate this idea within the context of your school. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Alison. I've got the rooms ready and I'll just open them now and I'll post the questions to that room.
I think we could have continued on. I think this particular connection circle probably could have gone on for an hour and a half or more. I do appreciate that it was really very, very quick, but I would love to invite you to really place any comments in your chat before you go, but I also invite you to send me an email or Richard an email. We would love to know more about what's happening in schools, and we don't know what we don't know. So we always drop a newsletter twice a term, and so our next one will drop in a couple of weeks. It would be wonderful if we could have a collection of, conversion in action from our schools. This is what's happening in our schools. It doesn't have to be huge. It could just be a few little points that come from each of you. We would love that. So unfortunately, it is 1 minute to 5 o'clock, and that means that we are going to actually, I'm just going to admit, Todd, he keeps getting bumped out. That means that we will finish for this year. I really do want to thank you for your participation today. As I said, we probably could have talked as educators much longer today, and probably in each of our connection circles. But I do thank you for your participation, and I really thank you for the last 6 weeks that you've been online with us as well. I certainly hope that you have enjoyed the course this year. I'd love any feedback from you. Next year, we in the Franciscan family, we are going to celebrate 800 years of St. Francis's Easter. That, of course, is his death and the continued legacy that is our Franciscan movement. So we will select a book that is going to be reflective of that. So anyone got some great ideas, love to hear from you. That would be really lovely. Most particularly, I'd really like to thank Richard again for facilitating with me. Richard and I have facilitated over the last 4 years now together, so I really do thank you. Richard is a wonderful person to be able to collaborate with, and I really thank him for his facilitation with me. Knowing that, I will certainly stay, and Richard will stay online for another 15 minutes or so if anyone has the time time to stay and wants to share anything more. But for our final reflection today and always and every day is the invitation to listen to the voice of creation. And so as Franciscans, we really join Francis to praise God through all of creation. I'm looking out my window today and I can see that the sun is going down and there is much to be thankful for. And so I'm going to turn to the first verse of the Canticle again. Most high, all powerful, good Lord, yours are the praises, the glory, the honor, and all blessing. To you alone, Most High, do they belong, and no human is worthy to mention your name. Praise and bless my Lord, and give him thanks, and serve him with great humility. I'd like to thank you again. Go and serve God with great humility. So enjoy the rest of this term. I know it's a busy one coming up. You're in the middle of marking and doing a variety of things like that. Thank you so much. As I said, we'll be online for another 15 minutes or so. Love to have a chat to anyone who can. And if you can, please email me some wonderful things that are happening in your school. Love to hear from you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Alison. Thanks, Richard.